Welcome to the Popcorn Junkies.
Popcorn Junkies, yeah.
Say hey, Mum.
Hi.
Say hi again.
Hi again.
We are reviewing Women Talking, which is curious because across the channel we haven't even reacted to a trailer for this. This is one of the films that's kind of in the Oscar mix. I think it's been nominated for Best Picture. This is directed by Sarah Polley. The only film I've seen by Sarah Polley is Stories We Tell, which was a really curious documentary / memoir about her mother using actors and performers to recreate some but not all of the Super 8 archive footage that she used to remember her. This is directed by Sarah Polley. It's based upon a book, is it, or a series of books?
Yes, a book. No, one book.
One book, but by, how do you pronounce her name?
Miriam Toews.
Miriam Toews.
Yes, she had a really strange life, Miriam Toews. Her sister killed herself and her father killed herself.
Wow.
She was brought up in this Mennonite, it's a Mennonite society where the rules are very strict and women have no rights at all and are hardly educated. And then she left it at 16. And the reason I'm mentioning her sister and her father is that some of her early books deal with those things. There's a very famous book by her called All My Puny Sorrows, which is amazing, and I think they might be making a film of that as we speak.
Oh, right, okay.
And what is incredible about her is that she has these, she talks about absolutely, dreadful, in a way, hard to hear subjects, suicide, abuse, blah, 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 but she's got the most amazing sort of dark sense of humour, so she can make you laugh in the same sentence.
This is a film, and it stars Claire Foy, from The Crown, Jessie Buckley, just gets better and better, Rooney Mara, Frances McDormand in a very tiny part, but she's also the producer, and Ben Whishaw as a sort of, I would say, sort of a resident kind of agreeable male.
A crying man.
A crying man. Set in the Mennonite community. I was reminded of, having filmed in Pennsylvania and places like that, or Philadelphia, I can't remember which, the Amish community. So this is very much a community sort of, held in time, preserved in aspect, religious, patriarchy, male-dominated, etc. And it's a film, as it says on the tin, it's a film about women talking.
Yeah.
But what are they talking about, Mark?
Yeah, they're having to decide whether they go or stay, because these various abuses have been happening to various women over a period of time.
By the men of their community.
By the men of their community. They only knew that for sure when one of the girls saw a man leaving the room and recognised him.
One of the younger girls, yeah.
Yeah. Told the elders, and they took him in, and that's, the men aren't there when the women are discussing it, because they're all bailing out the man who was taken in. They have three options: to stay and do nothing, to fight, or to leave and to start their own community. And August, who's the Ben Whishaw character, writes down what they're saying.
Okay, so we've got a sort of group of women that we home in on, but they're not the only women in the community. They're representative. There are sort of
three clans, in fact, three families.
So there's a lot more women in the community, but these are the sort of most, if you like, outspoken, motivated, kind of active.
Or whose children, like the Claire Bloom character, have had something Claire Foy, have had something so dreadful done to them that she can't even...
Yeah, they've all been pushed to a certain sort of boundary. Frances McDormand is there, but she's literally in two scenes, and
Scarface.
Scarface. She's like a sort of elder, and she's a sort of austere, and she's sort of almost, you felt for her because she's signed her life over to this place, and she can see these younger women are challenging it, and older women are challenging it. So there are more women in the place, but there are no men. I just have to ask from the outset, because this confused me all the way through. For saying it's a women talk, it's and we'll get into the parallels around feminism and how it's a fight still ongoing, and how it resonated for you as a sort of radical 70s radical feminist, and it resonated for me as your child as well. Why was Ben Whishaw allowed in?
Because they had no way of writing it down, because they couldn't write. They trusted him to write down a true reflection of what, no matter how
of
painful
what they were talking
it
about. He was taking
what
the
he
minutes.
was
He was taking
yeah,
minutes.
yeah.
It sounds like a weird thing to home in on. I found him the most troubling aspect of the whole film.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Because he sort of tugged against the...
Parable?
Yeah, it felt like a parable. It felt like a play. It's a very sort of contained scene within a sort of
It's almost Arthur Miller-ish, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very the Crucible-ish. Got that he was there to write things down, and the women had lacked education, not been allowed an education, didn't even know how to write. Even when there was a very powerful scene at the beginning when they got almost all the women in the community to vote on the three choices, and the only way they could put all the three choices were, which, as you say, were do nothing and stay, fight and leave. All they could do was mark an X underneath drawings. They couldn't even write the choices they had to try. I thought that was powerful. Oh, and but I liked right at the beginning, there was something in the narration that said we had been so denied the language of knowing what was happening to us that there would have been a total absence or vacancy of even an ability to reflect on the awful
Yes.
treatment they were getting. I thought that was really powerful.
Yes.
And I thought that almost swamped and overwhelmed everything that came afterwards, because that was so philosophically powerful about how they did lack all the language. And my problem with this film was I kept approaching it literally and metaphorically, but I kept getting irritated where I was getting bogged down in literalness.
Like, give me an example of that.
Ben Whishaw, for example, if they had been sort of disallowed the language of experience, how would they have been able to have expressed it at all?
Because of desperation.
Right.
That's why, I mean, what's very good about the film as well is that the sort of abuses that take place, and it's over a number of years, are only shown in an absence in a way, and you only get sort of what happened afterwards. You don't get any graphic sort of things.
I thought it was clever.
It was clever, so it distanced you in a way, and it didn't make you sort of so horrified you couldn't watch the screen. But they did it, Mark, because they were fighting for the lives of their children.
So it was their fear for their kids, in a sense. I get that.
Yeah.
I suppose that Ben Whishaw, I didn't believe that Ben Whishaw could have been as nice as he was, as understanding as he was, be allowed to teach the children, be allowed to be in the community, be able to exist within the community, presumably mostly amongst other men. And so there was a
Boys.
point, we're boys, but the fathers would have allowed him. There'd have been some involvement.
Yeah.
I see. This is what I mean. I got so kind of. I found him the most troubling aspect of the whole thing.
Yeah, well, in a way, I know what you mean, because I sort of did a bit, because I love Ben Whishaw.
Yeah, I do too.
But he often, I don't know if
I couldn't work out if what they were saying. So basically, it is really a film of the evolution of their discussion, their changes of opinion, their fear and their hopes to leave, escape. There's power struggles, not in the terms of ego, but there's fear around, if we leave, will we be damned? Will we not go to heaven?
Yeah.
What's the best thing for our children? Can we stay and educate? Should we? And I thought, that's really the meat, the sort of meat and veg
of it. Yeah. They clearly wrestle with all the philosophical elements, and there are some such, as you say, deep philosophical elements, but that they can always bring into it the Lord, and I never get that, because you sort of think, I mean, one of the arguments at the beginning, one of the discussions was, if we leave, how will God find us? And as one of the women said eventually, well, if he can find so-and-so, he'll find us. And there's a mixture of common sense, pragmatism, if you like, and complete mystic nonsense, which is to do with the Lord. But on the other hand, we are made to believe, and we do believe it because of the power of the speech and the acting, that it's vital to their lives. So one of the things that they say is, when they move, if they all decide that, because they all change their minds at some point or another, they will they'd have to keep within this religion. It's so important.
Well, there was that important exchange, wasn't there, where one of the women, I can't remember if it was Jessie Buckley or Claire Foy, they wanted to mete out violence.
Yes.
For them, they were going to get an axe, they were going to chop them up, they would watch them die, they would laugh as
Claire
they died.
Foy, yeah.
And then the oldest woman in the group said, look, I've really interrogated what it means in terms of our religion, and the only way is pacifism. I totally disagreed. I wanted to go out and go on a fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre rampage, because... and I thought it was, I don't know, I thought it was quite clever in all of that. I do believe these communities would be so ensconced within the religious framework that they would fear. I mean, Christ, Catholics who've renounced Catholicism, you yourself, so many Catholics still struggle with guilt and eternal damnation. So if you're embedded in this world where you've been educated in nothing other than this, I thought that was very powerful. But I kept finding that you've got this incredibly intense, incredibly powerful, feminist, significant dialogue going on between women, which quite obviously the reason it's been made and the reason it's successful critically is that it still presents an enormous parallel for what's going on now. It took us back to an era, the 70s, although it seems to strangely have been set in the 70s too, that was going on for you.
Yeah, there was no name for it then, whereas I who live in the West and had the power of education and all and access to books and access to everything, could decide that I would do something, as much as radical feminism, which these women wouldn't even have a name for, but what they were doing was trying to get away from the men. I mean, that was the nub of the problem.
But women are still doing that in this post-Sarah Everard community. And my daughter had an afternoon of hell at the hands of toxic masculinity, just gone. 3 different types: teachers, youngsters, and a person who's theoretically a nice potential boyfriend. Horrible men. And I, for me, actually, weirdly, seeing it on the Friday evening after that, I was sat there thinking, things haven't fucking changed. So I got quite depressed.
Yeah.
In a sense.
It is depressing.
Oh my God, yeah, but in a sense, it's a liberating film, because by the end, it's a parable, because again, the literalness of how it resolves itself and their sort of push for freedom and all this kind of stuff couldn't have literally happened like it does.
No.
It was poetic. It was.
But also, let me say this, that I think in a way, and I hate to use this phrase because in a way we're trying to avoid it with Ben Whishaw and whatever, that it will be much more difficult for men, and I have to say nice men, to watch than women, I would think.
Oh,
I mean, all the things that you were feeling because of exactly what had happened to you during the day, and the fact that you think, what is wrong with all these men? You are one.
Yeah.
And in the sense that I can think, well, all this is wrong, and the women can think, take the kids and run. We're not one, so we don't have to deal with that aspect of it.
I thought there was a really interesting dialogue in there about the specifics of the age of their children that they would take away with them, i.e. is a boy at the age of 12, 13 or 14, which is really resonant for us in our household, the behaviour of boys of that age. I thought that all that dialogue was really powerful around at what age is a boy unchangeable or set in their ways and could be mouldable towards a more sort of, equal, civilised, moral kind of attitude to women. I thought that was really telling because that goes to the whole nature-nurture. It goes to the whole topic of can men be educated out of toxic masculinity. And this is a film, and this is what's very clever about the film, it's a film about toxic masculinity without showing it overtly. I mean, obviously the whole thing is the consequence of that.
Yeah. But where Ben Whishaw is good in that, because the women ask him directly if they think that boys are a danger to their girls, and he says, after thought, he says yes.
Yeah, I was nodding ferociously.
Yeah, but he says they can be almost trained out of it.
I was tugged in two different directions.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I was really cross that there had to be a man involved in their freedom.
Yes.
Really cross that it involved a man, however nice and however much of a crying man. I kind of got indignant about that.
Yeah.
So, fuck's sake, why do we have so many films where men have to facilitate the
Yeah,
freedom?
no, it's true.
In a way, that would probably be the case. And then I thought, where this film was really powerful, and there was one particular sequence where I thought he did it so well, where I think it was around that conversation about when are boys rescuable.
Yeah.
Then I thought, it was also a film about how you have to involve men.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you remember, it was the sequence, the montage of all the boys' faces in class looking into camera.
Wasn't that incredible?
Incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Because it was showing you at what point does the tipping point between innocence and prejudice creep in?
That is so powerful, and the fact that the film had the nerve to do that with no sort of not warning us or anything. Because I always think one of the most powerful things for me when you get these true life crimes, and especially to do with violence against women, always what gets me, as well as the women obviously, are the photos or the pictures of the boys as young boys, and you think, what happens? What happened?
Yeah, when does it change? When did they become sort of horrible? And like as a father of daughters, you think, you fuckers.
Yeah.
But at what point were they kids, sweet kids,
Yeah.
who know no better?
Yeah, exactly.
There's one character that I'd like to ask your advice on, because I didn't get it at all. The girl who...
Don't tell me the woman with the horses.
No, she was lovely. She provided
was,
some
wasn't
lovely light relief. I loved also, by the way, I've been searching ardently for the wonderful quotes by the poet Coleridge about school, and how about learning isn't about sort of competition or ego, or it's everything he said was about homeschooling. Everything was about not learning the way that we learn.
Yes.
I thought it was beautiful, and I'm trying to pull together various quotes. But what I didn't understand, a character I really didn't understand. I didn't know why she was the girl who wasn't speaking, who was a boy.
Oh yeah,
Almost trans.
She was trans. She wasn't, because obviously there's no such thing as trans, but she was so traumatised by her rape and the birth of the child that she gave up speaking, cut her hair, and more or less identified as them, or as male.
How would that have been allowed in this community?
Good point.
I mean, and again, that's one of those other areas where I was drawn into a literal reading.
Yeah.
Whereas
they don't make much of her, do they? She looks after the younger children.
Yeah, but I'd say this is the only frustration I had with the film, where I had to keep actively pushing myself back to a metaphor. I thought, don't read this literally.
Don't.
But then let's get to the performances of the women. I thought they were all sensational, weren't they?
Well, absolutely, and I hope that rather than the fact that there wasn't somebody that could give an Oscar to, they were all Oscar worthy.
Well, I wish there was an award. I think there is in some. I think the Golden Globes, someone might do it. Ensemble cast award.
It was incredible. I mean, they all had sort of quirks of personality that were different. It would seem that the Jessie Buckley character's husband seemed to be one of the most violent.
I thought she was sensational. I thought Claire Foy was brilliant with that sort of bristling fury. I mean, I have to confess, I identified with her most because I think she wanted to kill people most. Although Jessie Buckley did too.
But the Claire Foy character as well, what she was worried about as well was from the religious aspect. She would be a murderess. She knows she would. And that's when one of the older women, I loved the two older women.
The two elder women.
The one with the
wonderful.
horses and the other one.
The other one was lovely, wasn't she?
I have never seen her in anything.
No. But for me, it was almost like a trip down memory lane to all of your feminist meetings in Blenheim Crescent.
Yeah.
Did you identify with the fight?
Yeah, I suppose it was far more clear cut for me in a way.
Right.
I mean, I got the first time I saw it.
You weren't hampered by the religious doubt.
No, exactly. And I mean, I got very, very upset at the end because there's swelling music and everybody leaves. And they've decided to take the boys, and the Claire Foy character persuades her son. He goes with them, and that for me was Mark when he was young, and Mark was coming with me, sort of thing, but not without lots and lots of protests from the movement. I mean, it was a strong movement in the 70s that I happened to be in.
And I think it's very beautifully shot. The slight frustration with the way it was shot for me was I found the green screen through the barn doors really obvious. It was quite clear that this was a sound studio set, and a lot of the shots were very Netflixy in their execution with the CGI. I mean, it's a minor gripe, but because the landscape was beautiful, I was getting vibes of, do you remember that Harrison Ford Amish film Witness?
Yeah, and
where
also,
they shot it all for real.
That Terrence Malick film.
Yes, Days of Heaven.
Yeah,
the crop fields.
Yeah,
and
the
all that
crop
kind
fields.
of stuff. Yeah.
But also, in terms of filming, I like the fact that it could almost have been black and white to begin with, and then very slowly.
Very monochrome, wasn't it? It made me think a lot about things like Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. I was getting the Crucible vibes. I was thinking of Witness, the Amish film. I was thinking about that Marcy Macy May, the sort of cult thing, because it's not too far from ago. And I thought it was quite neat the way in which this could have been 15th century wherever.
Yeah.
And the only moment where that was punctured was with the car driving through. Was it the Monkeys they were playing? Which was kind of curious. Yeah. Okay, well, let's sum it up and score it. Come on.
Okay, well, for the fact that it spoke to me of my life and of some of the fights and whatever, it is deeply, deeply philosophical. And I want to say this to you viewers, and not to make it sound boring, but I sort of want to underline that because I, if you like, was halfway there because of what I went through when I was younger. But I know how difficult it was for people to begin to grasp even what, it'd be, what do you mean, abandoned men? What do you mean?
That was maybe your different mountain to climb, was whereas they had to clamber over religion, you had to clamber over the newness of what you were saying.
Yeah, no, that's true.
What was radical feminism then is now just basic rights.
Yeah. Well, yes, exactly. So it brought up loads and loads of sort of emotions like that. I thought the actual writing was brilliant. I thought the way that they argue, the way that they change their minds, the way that everybody's and not necessarily supports each other because they lose their temper with each other like you would. I think it's, and I know I over-exaggerate, but I do think it's a masterpiece of writing. And I would give it, and I'm thinking of this score, 94.
Okay. I mean, I thought it was all of those things. I totally echo everything you said. I really thought it was quite a clever film about what's men's part in sorting women's, circumstances out in terms of, fighting patriarchy. What is men's role? I thought Ben Whishaw was a troubling presence for me. It's problematic in terms of the story, in terms of the gender politics, in terms of their sort of reliance on him as a frustration, though in a weird way it would be true. I saw that you cried a few times about the dichotomy between what they were striving for and having sons, and in a sense almost their own sons being in the enemy's camp by simply dint of being sons, which is very relatable for us. So there was all of that. I thought that was really intriguing. As you say, I thought the script was beautifully written. I thought the performances were absolutely sensational. But obviously all the main stars are getting the look in, whereas I think the supporting cast was sensational. It was just a real, and you could see it as a fantastic play. I get frustrated with films that almost exploit the theatrical stage-like execution because I think this is cinema. Come on, get larger with it.
But for example, let me just
or smaller but larger.
Yeah, let me just sort of interject this in. I didn't think, for example, it was as stagey as The Whale.
No, I agree.
For example,
Sorry,
which
I agree. Nor The Sun, they were stage plays. So so I thought it was really meditative. I thought it was really thought-provoking. I thought it was heartbreaking.
You have to think about the issues, don't you?
You have to think about the issues, and I thought about them afterwards. But I really was struck by that line about if we don't have the language, we never had the language, we'd never learnt the language, and that's in a way why, for so long, they'd never challenged what they were going through. And I thought that was incredibly powerful for all, white sort of privilege, male privilege, for all minorities or sections of society that have been essentially controlled by patriarchy. It's like, well, if you haven't got the language, it takes so long to get round it, to kind of criticize it and pull it apart. So I thought it was really thought-provoking and all of that. I thought it was very clever the way they didn't use the men. I thought it was nice that men were absent from it and all that kind of stuff. So so what would I give it? I would give this 90 out of 100. I think I think it was a really important film. The most major thing that I came out of with it was, yes, the ending is supposed to be rousing, but I really, really felt quite depressed about how profoundly things haven't changed for young women now, and how in many regards they've potentially got worse. And I found it quite depressing in that, because of course this is an extreme example of a community where they're beaten up, drugged and raped. But in our landscape today, I was thinking, oh my God, this is, I mean, obviously it's a metaphor, obviously it's a parallel.
And also the end is mythic in the sense that we're just supposed to...
That, going back to your original thing, that's what I read into this is a work of female imagination.
Oh, I see.
Was that the escape in that sort of romantic, idyllic fashion.
Oh, I see.
Was a work of female imagination.
Okay.
So I fully recommend seeing it.
Yes, and me.